Hello, everyone. Mr. Chapa here. I've received a few requests for help on question 14 in homework 7.2. And there wasn't really an issue with how to do the math, but rather how to click the things you need to click in the homework to get the answer they're expecting. So we're going to go right into it. All right, what you see here is question 14 from homework 7.2. And you're given a function, f of x equals 0.1 times x minus 3 squared times x plus 2 cubed, or whatever function you may have, and you're asked to do four things. The first of which is to find the end behavior. Well, without going into all the details, which is a lie, I'm about to go into all the details, just looking at the function one last time. We're given this function, f of x equals 0.1, and then we have something squared and something cubed. The something squared is x minus 3. The something cubed is x plus 2. If we want to find the end behavior, we have to know what the leading term is. And to find the leading term, we just multiply the leading term in each factor, including powers, and then glue it all together. So if we put all that together, we would have 0.1 times x squared times x cubed as the leading term. If we add the exponents, we get 0.1x to the 5th power, plus some other stuff that doesn't matter when we're finding the leading term. And to find the end behavior, we first figure out based on the leading coefficient being positive, in this case 0.1. This 0.1 being positive means that the right end rises, or the right end goes up. If it were negative, the right end would go down. And because the degree is odd, excuse me, that's not what I meant to put. Because the degree is odd, this means we have opposite ends. So the conclusion that we draw, thus, we know the left goes down because it is the opposite of what the right does, and the right goes up. So let's go ahead and get that in there. This really wasn't the issue that I was asked about, but let's go ahead and explain it. Down to the left, up to the right, we'll check that and get past it. We're being asked to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept is simply the value when you substitute 0 for x. All of these little things were elaborated in prior videos. So for the y-intercept, we find f of 0. Well, if we find f of 0, then we get 0.1 times 0 minus 3 squared times 0 plus 2 cubed. Let's make sure I got the function right. Yes. Then we just work that out. Inside the first parenthesis, 0 minus 3 is negative 3. That's squared. Inside the second, 0 plus 2 is 2. That's cubed. All right. Negative 3 squared is 9. 2 cubed is 8. 7 times 8 is 72. And when you multiply by 0.1, it just moves the decimal to the left once. And so we get 7.2 is the y-coordinate of the y-intercept. Now, I believe that this wants the ordered pair. So 0, 7.2 would be our y-intercept. For the real zeros of the function, that means we solve the function equal to 0. So let's find the zeros. So basically, we're forcing 0 to come out of the function instead of forcing 0 to go into the function. Well, our function is 0.1 times x minus 3 squared times x plus 2 cubed is equal to 0. Now, we could do a lot with this, but if we're just solving this equal to 0, we only have to put each factor equal to 0. X plus 2 is equal to 0. X minus 3 is equal to 0. And technically, you could also put 0.1 equal to 0, but that doesn't even make sense because those numbers aren't equal and there's no x to solve for. If we were to finish solving, we would get x equals 3 and x equals negative 2. If you're wondering why we ignored the powers, because the powers as multiplicities actually do more. They don't change the zeros, they change what they do. For example, that x equals 2 that square means that it has a multiplicity of 2. And because that multiplicity is even, we know that the graph would touch the x-axis at 2. But the other 0 has a multiplicity of 3. And because 3 is odd, that means that this graph will actually cross the x-axis at x equals -2. But the homework didn't ask us all that. They just asked us for the zeros, and the zeros are 3 and -2. That's funny that they want these as single numbers. They don't want them as ordered pairs. You can tell because they don't prompt you. They don't give you the option of clicking the ordered pairs button. But it's this last part that people really wanted some help with. So let's take a look at this. All right, and the graphing part, they want me to plot at least 6 points. So that means I should plot 6. Now we've already got 3 ordered pairs. We know the y-intercept is 0, 7.2, but we also know that the zeros of the function correspond to x-intercepts. In other words, as we put each number into the function, we get out 0. So what does that mean for our particular problem? Well, let's list our 6 points. Let's put this back in black. 6 points. Well, our y-intercept is 0, forgot what the y-intercept was, 7.2. We have 2 x-intercepts because we had 2 zeros of the function. The zeros of the function were 3 and -2, which we can see right here. 3 and -2. Let me do one more thing because I am going to save this as a PDF. Point the arrow up to the multiplicities. Since our zeros are 3 and -2, that means that we have an x-intercept at 3, 0 and -2, 0. Putting in 3 gives us 0, putting in -2 gives us 0. But we need 3 more points. And in order to get 3 more points, all we have to do is pick some numbers and stick them into the function. Now, we can't put in 0. And we can't, well, we can, but we already know the results. If we put in 0, we already know that we're going to get 7.2. If we put in 3, we know we're going to get 0. If we put in -2, then we know we're going to get 0. So if we want to make 3 more points, then we just have to pick some numbers to put into this function. There's no need to get carried away. I would keep them small. We'll figure out what happens when we put in 1. We'll figure out what happens when we put in 2, and we've already put in 3. Why don't we go backwards to -1? There are no wrong choices here. If you pick something that we already know about, like the y and the x-intercepts, then you're not going to gain any more information. And I wouldn't pick ludicrously large numbers because that's just going to make the numbers larger than we have to be. So I'd keep them pretty small, keep the x's pretty closest to the x's that we already know about. What was our function? 0.1 times x minus 3 squared times x plus 2 cubed. All right, let me write the function up here so I don't forget. 0.1 x minus 3 squared x plus 2 cubed. All right, and now we just got to do the math. If we put in 1, we'll get 0.1. In the first parentheses, 1 minus 3 is -2. That's going to be raised to the second power. In the second parentheses, 1 plus 2 is 3. That's going to be raised to the third power. Let's see, -2 squared is 4. 3 cubed is 27. 4 times 27 is 108, and then times 0.1 is 10.8. I would expect you to do this in a calculator. It's just faster for me to do it without one here. If we put in 2, we'll still get 0.1. In this parentheses, we get 2 minus 3, which is -1, so that's going to get squared. But in this parentheses, the second parentheses, we're going to get x plus 2. Excuse me, we're putting in 2 for x. We're going to get 2 plus 2, which is 4. And that is raised to the third power. 4 to the third power is 64. -1 to the second power is 1. 64 times 1 is 64. Times 0.1 is 6.4. And then lastly, when we put in -1, we'll get 0.1. In the first parentheses, we put in -1, we get -1 minus 3 is -4. That parentheses is squared. And if we put -1 in the second parentheses, Well, that's good because get this to draw. If I put -1 there, -1 plus 2 is 1. We get 1 to the third power. 1 to the third power is 1. -4 to the second power is 16. 1 times 16 is 16, and then multiply times 0.1 to get 1.6. Again, I would expect you to use a calculator to do this. All right, so now we've got a total of 6 points, the y-intercept, the 2 x-intercepts, and 3 more points that we generated by choosing some relatively small values to put in for the x value. And remember, every time you do a function problem, the number that goes in is the x and the number that comes out is the y. Our fourth ordered pair will be 1, 10.8. Our second will be 2, 6.4. And our third will be -1, 1.6. Now all we have to do is go into the homework and put these points in here. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, if you hover over a tool, it tells you what to do. Graph a function, eraser, plot a point. And we're being asked to plot 6 points. Now, when I click this, it's going to prompt me to type in the x and y coordinates of an ordered pair. Do not approximate. For example, write 1/3 and not 0.33. 1/3 is an exact value. 0.33 is an approximation. It's not saying don't use decimals, but if that decimal goes forever and you're forced to round, don't use it. All right, so let's put in the numbers that we know. We'll be going back and forth. Maybe. Come on. All right, let's start with 0.0, 7.2. And then I can hit tab 7.2 and click plot the point. If we scroll down, you'll see it plotted the point, but we need 5 more points. Our next 2 will be our x-intercepts, 3, 0 and -2, 0. So 3 tab 0, -2. I can't type comma, it's already there. -2, 0. And we've got those 3 points plotted. Now we need the 3 points that we generated by choosing our own x values. 1, 10.8, that will be our fourth point. 1, 10.8, plot it. And then 2, 6.4. 2, 6.4, and I'm not typing comma, I'm hitting the tab key to take me from the x coordinate to the y coordinate. And then the fifth and final point that we're going to plot, -1, 1.6. -1 tab 1.6 plot, and we can close the plot a point anywhere box. And now we've got these 6 points, and now we just have to click graph a function, and it draws it. Now, I find it interesting that it automatically assumes the end behavior when we didn't plot it, but it knows what's graph it's looking for. We check it, and everything should be okay. And everything was okay. All right, and again, if you're having trouble with this last part, please let me know so I can give you some guidance. It's pretty straightforward. There's just some work that you have to do, and you have to make some random decisions. I need to pick a number to put into my function. What's going on here? I'm trying to shut things down and it's acting stupid. All right.